Okay, so we're going to go to our fun workbook. Okay, and today we're working on charting, and we went through a bar chart, a pie chart, and a 3D chart. We went on a combination chart where we have two different chart types on the same chart, which is what we have up here. We have a line chart and a column chart. What we're going to do today is something I think is super cool. We are going to look at something called sparklines and win-loss charts and also data bars. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is go to your sectors worksheet. All right, which looks like this, and we're going to put in a new heading here over in E3. I would like you to write in here 10-year history. And let's format it the same as S&P 500 baseline. So I'm just going to paint that format over there. Instead of remembering what it was, I can just paint that over. Okay, what we want to put into these fields, E3, E4 down to E15, is if we look at sector history, okay, we can see, these returns had a history, right? The software, for example, on 1/1/2004 was 10,000, and it went to 10,700, and then on July 1st it went to 10,300. So we'd like to not just see the overall return, which is what we have over here in sectors, but we'd like to see how it progressed via a line chart. Now what's nice about what a sparkline is it's a very condensed chart. So it's a way to conserve space, yet inform the viewer. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight E4 through E15, and this is where the location where we're going to put our sparklines. I'm going to click Insert, and over here in the sparklines group, you see right here, we're going to work with wins, loss columns in a little bit, but let's go click on line. Okay, so by pre-selecting E4 through E15, you see that was put into our location range, like where do we want to put these sparklines. But now I have to tell it what data I want to use to create these sparklines. So click on the little spreadsheet, okay, under data range. This is the data that I'm going to graph. And this information is over here in sector history. So click on the sector history tab, and you see it automatically pre-fills that worksheet, sector history exclamation point. And what I want to highlight is B6 the whole way through M45. Okay, so these are all respective to what we saw in the first one. And click the close window. And then click OK. Okay, and what you'll see it has created here is little graphs inside of cells. And a sparkline doesn't have a title, it doesn't have labels. It is meant just to give the person an impression of, hey, what happened here? What happened over time? And you can see most of these funds, had experienced a serious, drop about the same time. Maybe that was a recessionary period or a depression period. But now these are called sparklines, and by default, because we created them together, they're in a group. They're all one group, so that they have the same look and feel, if you will. Much like the chart tools, because we're selected on the sparklines, there are a bunch of parameters we can change at this point. You see there's a sparkline tools up above, and we have design. So we can pick a different color if we like. So if we go under styles, let's pick, I don't know, I'm going to go with the, let's go with the third one down. So they're blue. And sometimes I also want to take note of special occurrences. And you can see under the show, we can show the high point and the low point. Okay, for this trend, you know, where the high point and the low point was, it gave us a special little point. We can also, if we would like, we could change those colors. So if we go over to marker color, we have options under here for the high point, for example. Maybe I want to make the high point a green, and under marker color, perhaps I want to make the low point a red. Okay, and now if I click off that, it's kind of easier to see those things. But this is, you know, a chart embedded in Excel. It really is a way to conserve space. Now, if you notice, okay, these things are grouped. If I click on one of those cells, you see it automatically selects all the cells. And that's good in a lot of cases because maybe I want all the spark lines in a group to be the same. But perhaps I want to highlight separately the software sparkline. If I click on that, and you'll see under the sparkline tools grouping, there's an ungroup. Okay, I can ungroup it. And now anything I change is I ungroup this from the group, and anything I can change is just applied to this line. Okay. Now I think you can see how these can be, you know, quite useful, quite informative. It doesn't go through this in the book, but another kind of nice little chart as well as a sparkline chart, there's something called a win-loss chart. And a lot of times we would hide the data for this, but let's go over to, let's make a new worksheet just so I can show you what that looks like. So click on the new worksheet tab. Are we good? Everyone get that sparklines dealio? Good? Let's go to sheet 1 here. And let's put in, I don't know, let's put in a couple teams. Let's say Tigers and Lions and Bears. And let's say the Tigers are undefeated at 5-0. Oops, 5-0. Okay, now what that did is it thought it was a date. Thought it recognized it as a date, so it automatically formatted it. Let's put in, and if you ever need this, like if it tries to interpret something as a formula or a date, if you use the single quotation mark, the single, like you know what I'm talking about, and then I put in 5-0, it says recognize it as is. Okay, so let's make these the Lions 5-0. Let's make these guys, I don't know, 3-2. And let's make the Bears 1-4. So that's informative. We know they won 5 games and lost none. Won 3 games, lost 2. But maybe we don't know how their season is playing out. Like, are they rallying? Or are they, you know, in currently a bad streak? But we have that information. It's kind of hard to look at. So let's go over here and let's say these guys won all their games. So let's just put in from D3 through, let's just put in 5 1s because they won 1, 1, 1. Okay, so we'll use a 1 to indicate a win. And let's say the Lions won 1, and then we'll use -1 for a loss. Then they won 2, and they lost 1. So that's 3-2. And we'll say the Bears won their first one, and then it got ugly for them. So if, once again, we highlight C3 through C5, go to Insert, and under Sparkline Group, we're going to insert a win-loss chart. And the location range you see is still C3, C5, and my data range is going to be D3 through H5 respectively. And I click OK. And now, we kind of get a feel for what is happening in their seasons. We can see visually, in one chart, we can see, the Tigers win, 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 win. The Lions win, loss, win, win, loss. The Bears win, loss, 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 loss. Okay, so it doesn't, I use win-loss because this, win-loss for games. But you think about it, it could be for a lot of different things. Did the stock go up? Did the stock go down? Did you is the count positive or negative? Whatever it might be. A lot of binary type events in the world of business. Binary meaning it's on or it's off. Okay, and you can even, if it was neutral, I guess let's say the Tigers had a tie in the middle. They tied someone. You could put a 0 in there, and it just doesn't show a point. It shows it as a blank point. Okay, and you can format this, as you see fit as well with green and red. But I think you can see, and what we'd probably do is we'd just hide this data. We'd take this data and we'd hide it. We need it. Oops. Why did it hide that though? Yeah, I don't know why it hides my Sparkline. I don't like that at all. Okay, I thought you could hide it and it'd be all right. I don't understand that. But anyways, let us also look at something called, so under that grouping as well, although we didn't do it, there is also under the Sparklines, you might as well just show what that might look like. There's lines, there's win-loss chart, there's also a column chart as well. Okay, so you could use columns. Now this one isn't very descriptive because they're all 1s and 5s, but if you have data, you can show a little bar chart as well. Okay, so it's really a nice tool, can really, conserve space on your spreadsheet and kind of really dress it up. All right. So those are Sparklines, and I think you'll find them, quite useful and kind of separate your work from others if you use them well. Let's also look at something called data bars. So I want to go to the sectors worksheet. Once again. And we can definitely see, the numbers tell us a story. For example, if we look at the S&P 500 baseline, what was the best sector? What was the best sector?
Financial services.
Okay, financial services. What was the least sector, least successful sector? Give me a bad one.
Telecom.
Yeah, telecom was 3.29, but also media not so hot, software not so hot. Okay, but it takes us some time. Our brain takes some time to interpret those numbers and say, hey, rank them, right? It takes us a little bit of time, and especially, this is a grouping of what, 10 maybe. If we had 20 or 50, even more so. But a picture is worth 1,000 words. So what we're going to do in this one is we're going to select C4. Well, let's do D4. Well, let's do the whole thing. C4 through D15. So select our data. And this one is under, these data bars are under conditional formatting, which we've used before. So go to conditional formatting, click the drop down, and we want to go to data bars. And let's just pick, I don't know, let's pick the green solid fill data bars at this point. Okay, so what this does is if we look at like the S&P 500, you guys, the highest value in that range is that 20.63. So that data bar covers that whole cell, right? And now everything is relative to that. 10.17 is about half of that. So you'll see it covers about half of that cell, right? So visually looking at this, it's much easier for me to see like, hey, where were the good years and where were the bad years, right? Visually I can see the bars that my eyes are drawn to, hey, there's a good year, there's a bad year. It's a conditional format. What might be a problem with this? What might be one problem with this as far as readability? What might be a problem with this as far as readability?
All the same color.
Same color, okay, I can go with that. Yes.
Kind of blocks your numbers, like the 20.63.
Yeah, it does kind of block your numbers, does it not? It kind of, you know, you could make that a little different color perhaps, but maybe we don't want it to go on our text at all. You know, we want it just to be, you know, we want bars relative to one another, but we want it a little bit different. So remember, this is a conditional format. So if I highlight that section again and go under conditional formatting, and if you remember, there was manage rules. Okay, manage rules takes us to all the conditional formatting on whether a workbook, a worksheet. It says show formatting rules for current selection. So whatever it is, you should see that data bar that we just created. And what we want to do is we want to edit that rule. Okay, so the maximum is automatic and the minimum is automatic. You see those values down there? It says minimum automatic, maximum automatic. I want to make it so that the maximum for the whole bar, like 0.20 is the maximum at this point because it's by default. Well, I want to say like, let's make the top of this bar, the whole cell, bigger than that so that if this is 20%, it doesn't stretch the whole way. Do you know what I'm saying? So what I'm going to do in the maximum is I'm going to change that from automatic. I'm going to change it to number. And let's put in here 0.40. Okay, because it is a percentage, right? Percentages are decimals. So I'm going to say the highest should be 0.40. So there isn't any values that are 0.40 that are going to take the whole damn thing up. But if there were, you know, so I click OK. Click OK again. Okay, and now you'll see the bars are still, you know, relative to one another. This is still 20%, and this is still 10%, and that bar is still half of the 20% bar, but it doesn't clog up my numbers. I still have both the readability and I have, you know, that aspect ratio that I'm looking for. If I made one, let's make this guy from 3.14, let's make him, I don't know, 39% now. And you'll see now it almost takes the whole bar because the cell is now 40% is the cell. Does that make sense? Okay. If other things that might be useful, if we highlight that whole selection again, go under conditional formatting, go under manage rules, and let's edit that rule again. A lot of times with these, instead of using a solid fill, we use a gradient fill, okay, which is kind of, you know, has a little softer to it. So let's use gradient fill and let's pick a different color. Let's use like maybe a lighter green perhaps. And I click OK. And if I click off that, you know, maybe that's a little too light, very hard to read, but you know, we can edit those things as we see fit. We could also, I kind of like having both there. but if we highlight everything, go to Manage Rules, there's also an option to get rid of, the text itself, like the number, and just show the bar. I don't know, I think that kind of takes away from things. I never really used this. I don't know what this does to color scale. I guess that does, I don't know what that does. I guess the high ones are green, the low ones. So, I guess it makes it kind of like a heat map, if you would. It looks like, I've never used that feature or function, but I can see how that could be useful as well. Instead of doing what we did with the wind, we could have done this. Okay, any questions on spark lines and data bars? Okay, and hopefully you guys can see how those can really dress up a spreadsheet and make it a lot more useful. Now, what we're going to do next, we're going to kind of play around with a 3D chart. And really, I'm not a huge fan of 3D charts. I think a lot of times they get what they're trying to convey gets lost in the artistic notion of it. And I think that's true in this little exercise we're going to do here in a second. The end-up graph, I think, is ugly as hell. It looks, it's not a useful graph. It looks okay, I guess. But let's work on something called a 3D graph, and we're going to create a chart sheet, which I think I mentioned to you earlier. So I want you to go to Fund History. And we're going to select the range A4. So we're just going to graph this one line chart down to B44. Earlier we graphed 3 at once. Remember, on a 2-dimensional, it's over here on the right-hand side. But let's do A4 to B44. And we're going to go to Insert. And we're going to go to Charts. But instead of going with our 2-dimensional chart, let's go down here where it says 3D line. Okay, and it puts in our start of our 3D line. Now, I think I mentioned this to you earlier. In a workbook, we have worksheets, the tabs. We can also have, and typically we don't do this, we can have a chart sheet. We can make this graph itself a tab. Okay, so it's treated distinctly and it's on its own. And we do that the same way we move charts to different locations. If we go up to under Chart Tools, under Design, you see the Move Chart dialog. And under Move Chart, we've been moving to an object in an existing worksheet. But let's move it to a new sheet. And I think it wants us to call this, cover sheet. So maybe we're creating a cover sheet for our report that has a fancy-dancy 3D line chart on it. So click OK. Okay, now you'll see it is its own tab. This is the worksheet. This chart, there's no cells, there's no A, B, 1, 2, 3. It is the worksheet. Okay, it's called a chart sheet. It wants us to use, under chart styles, it wants us to use I think it's the 40th one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I think this one right here, style 40, yeah. Okay, so we have that. Let's get rid of the legend. However you want to get rid of legend, I'm going to go up to Layout, go to Legend, and say None. You could also have clicked on it and deleted it. We're going to remove the axes. So I'm going to go to Axes under Layout. And I'm going to say primary horizontal axis, none. And I'm going to go to primary vertical axis, none. There's also a depth axis. Remember, this is 3D, so there's an axis there. So if we go under axes again and go to depth axis, and let's get rid of that guy as well. I think we use this a little bit, but under 3D rotation, under layout, under background, let's go to 3D rotation, and we'll do what the book prescribes us to do, but you'll see, I think we end up making a fairly ugly chart. So click on 3D rotation. And I think we saw this earlier. We can rotate around the X, Y axes for this one. So it wants us to make the X rotation 60 degrees. It wants us to make the Y at 20. And perspective is like our perspective into viewing this chart. You see the perspective? So it kind of how we're going to look at it. So it wants to make that 80 degrees, I believe. Yes, 80 degrees. And if I move this over, you'll see it's kind of rotating the chart. Okay, also in the chart scale area, there's a percentage of base value, and it says 100% at this point. Change that to 1,000. Okay, and what it does, you see, is it makes our line wider. Okay, because it changes the depth as a percentage of the base. It wants us to look at under fill. This is the background of this deal. It wants us to go to gradient fill. And under preset colors, it wants us to use daybreak, which is the fourth one. I guess that looks like a sunrise, apparently. Under direction, for the gradient, it wants us to use linear down. And I click close. And there is what it wants us to have at the end. I would probably, I guess if you were going for something aesthetic, I would get rid of the chart wall. So if we go to chart wall and say none, and let's get rid of the floor as well. And the grid lines, I don't know, maybe get rid of those as well. And if I rotated this, I don't know, I'd probably rotate this differently. So I guess what they're saying here is we're creating a big report about our funds here, and perhaps we would use this as our, to show what our fund did, like as a cover sheet. Not really to inform people, but to, give them if there's one graph that represents how our fund did in a pretty way, perhaps this would be it. Okay. And like I said about these charting functions, literally, we probably covered, I don't know, maybe 50% of them. But there are a lot of things you can change there. I mean, there are a lot of things you can do with Excel by just simply like playing around with things, like try it out, and that's what's beautiful about it is it's very intuitive. So, some things just by clicking around, you can learn things, new ways to present things. It's important that you know how to navigate, how to do, the basics. But other than that, there's word art, which we really haven't covered under formatting. There's all kinds of other things we can do with this to dress it up in a given way. So I'm gonna stop there. That concludes Module 4.